You want to make some picks on your favorite sports? Check out Underdog's Fantasy Pick'em game, where you can pick higher or lower on between 2 to 8 players and can win up to 325 times your entry by using code Niners when you sign up, and you'll get $1,000 bonus cash and a free pick.
From the alley-oops at Keysar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk that. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I want to talk about salary cap casualties that may fit for the 49ers. Now, when I was going through the list, I found a pretty comprehensive list that actually came out before some of these cuts became official. And in fact, some of these cuts are not official, but it is looked at, and when you start looking at the numbers and you look at the salary cap, that a lot of these guys are going to be available. They're going to be casualties. And I want to talk about that. Which one of these guys could fit with the 49ers? It's not like the 49ers are going to be able to sign a bunch of guys, but sometimes when you get people that are salary cap casualties, especially when they're later in their career, they might be interested in coming in a little bit cheaper rate. Some names are going to seem very familiar. Guys who have even played for the 49ers or have family that plays for the 49ers. I'm also going to sprinkle in some guys you probably haven't heard about. These are guys that I've kept tabs on as we've went through the draft and players that fit the 49ers system to try to find some players that could be cheap that the 49ers might be able to get into their organization and develop. Now, not all these guys are going to end up getting cut. I think it's hard to predict everyone that is, but the guys at the top have already been cut or are very likely to. So it's going to be a good conversation. We're going to find players that potentially fit in the 49ers system. And let's be honest, the 49ers have to make some wholesale changes. They need help at several positions, whether that's in the secondary, maybe potentially at linebacker, defensive line. Then you look on the offensive side of the ball. They need to address the tight end room, which is pretty darn bare. Then you look across at the offensive line. Is there somebody there? Could there be a running back? Could there be a wide receiver? There's a lot of questions about Deebo Samuel. In fact, Deebo might be one of these cuts that comes up. Then you've got to replace his production. And who knows what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk with the type of injury that he had, when he's going to come back. October, November, training camp? I don't know. And I think with some of the fact that you don't know, and probably the 49ers don't know for sure either. I'm sure they have a timeline, but they need to make sure they address wide receiver at some point as well, whether that's in free agency or one of these guys that are going to be potentially moved on from. And then you can strike on a player that you ultimately really like. So it's going to be a lot of fun to go through some of these names. And if you guys have players that you've heard about, especially if you're from another area and you hear about players that are going to become available in your city, send them on over. I'm very interested to see if those players could make sense for the 49ers. So this is going to be a good one. And, I'm sure if you looked at the thumbnail, you have a pretty good idea of a couple of players that we're going to talk about. We are going to address Raheem Mostert. We are going to address Joey Bosa. Do those make sense for the 49ers? We're going to talk about some of the big ticket players as well. And we're also going to talk about some guys that maybe you haven't heard much about. But please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. It helps out a lot. It pushes the content out to more people. So I really appreciate everyone that does that. It means a lot to me. And if you are going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. So I went through and I made my list. I looked at a lot of different categories, searched a lot of different articles from multiple cities to find players that are being talked about as potential cap casualties in their territory. Now, I started this a while back, so I've been working on this for a while. And as I'm working on it, the players are actually being cut. They're being released and they're being waived and moved on from, and they have become cap casualties. So it's interesting that through the process, guys are actually getting moved. So it kind of gives you an idea that things are going to start picking up, especially because players are coming up on the point where they have roster bonuses and decisions that need to be made before free agency. And maybe the team wants you to take a pay cut and you're not willing to, and they go ahead and move on and let you go a different direction. So first, I want to talk about a couple of 49ers guys that we already know have become salary cap casualty. Now, one has, one hasn't. Javon Hargrave, of course, is a June 1, post-June 1 cut. That is going to save the 49ers some money. They had decided this a long time ago. The exit interviews, then the presser, John Lynch came out and said, yep, he's going to be a June 1 cut. We would love to have a potential reunion, but, it's got to kind of, we're interested, but what is Hargrave going to get on the open market, basically, is what he was saying, reading between the lines. So Hargrave is going to be gone. Now, with all the conversation surrounding Deebo Samuel, I think that there's a real chance that the 49ers end up releasing Deebo Samuel. And that's frustrating. But the reason that it makes the most sense is actually if you trade him, you're going to actually take on more money in 2025 than you would if you designated him for a post-June 1 cut. He could still negotiate a new contract with whatever team he wants to sign with when the new league year starts. But the money for the 49ers would not be available for him. The money, the savings wouldn't be available till post-June 1. But the 49ers did that last year, and it works out. It helps your football team when you go post-June 1. And the way it would help the 49ers is instead of all $31 million of Deebo Samuel's dead money hitting the 2025 salary cap, just over $10 million would hit the salary cap in 2025, and then the other $20+ million would hit in 2026 when the 49ers were preparing for a big cap number in dead money from Deebo anyway. So what it would do is just kind of defer that. By going June 1, you're only allowed 2 players to June 1, June 1 designate. By doing that, it defers their money, so a lot of it hits in 2026 instead of taking the full blunt of it in 2025. That's why releasing Deebo Samuel probably makes more sense than trading Deebo Samuel. And yeah, you don't get anything back for it. You only get savings. It does allow him to go on the open market and pick his own team, but it also allows you some salary cap flexibility to go out there and make some moves. And what were you going to get from Deebo that was going to replace Deebo? Probably nothing. Let's say you got a mid-round pick. Yeah, you might hit on a player. I don't think it was going to be a wide receiver that you hit on that was going to do the things Deebo does. And really, there's no one that does Deebo things. So you're kind of changing the makeup of your offense a little bit anyway. So those are the post-June 1 cuts. Now we can start evaluating, and I do think Deebo is going to get cut. Let me know what you think of who could possibly come in. And the world kind of went ablaze a little bit over the weekend as Nick and Joey Bosa's mom posted a picture of them in 49ers gear together. And of course, it was an edited version made by, one of the fan sites. They put it out there. It had Joey Bosa wearing 99, Nick Bosa wearing 97, and it was kind of just illustrating, hey, this is a possibility. Now, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, somebody had come into the comment section and they said, hey, I'm pretty much thinking that Joey Bosa is going to get released. And it was somebody that had heard it from the local market down there. And so I kind of got that on my radar. That's kind of what sparked this particular video, is finding those guys that could be released. And when you go deeper into Joey Bosa's salary cap hits, it does make a lot of sense. He's due $25 million this season, but none of it is guaranteed. And they can basically save $25 million in salary cap space by moving on from Joey Bosa. So that makes sense. Also, March 12th, he is due a $12.5 million roster bonus. It has to happen before then. So likelihood is beginning of March, probably around the combine, they'll probably try to talk trade. If they can't trade Joey Bosa, then they'll probably just end up releasing him and letting him go out on the open market to save $25 million because they do have a lot of needs that they need to address. So the 49ers would have the potential of signing Joey Bosa if he became available. Now, some of the concerns that people have are very valid. Joey Bosa hasn't been able to stay healthy over the last few years. He has been in and out of the lineup. His sack production has been down. Last year, he had 5. Over the last 3 seasons, he's had 14. Now, I will say this about the production last season. It was Jim Harbaugh's first year with Los Angeles Chargers and a little bit of a different defensive philosophy. They were very good. But we saw Khalil Mack's sack numbers take a step back. He went from 17 to 7, and Joey Bosa was only able to get 5. So the questions about what kind of production they would have in a different system, I think, is a honest conversation to have. Now, the biggest concern has to be the fact that Bosa just is injured. And 49er fans absolutely can't stand injured players. We need guys that are going to be on the field. But the thought of having the Bosa brothers together, 2 guys that are elite enough to have double-digit sack numbers every season, could upgrade the 49ers pass rush extensively. And all the conversations this offseason have been about edge rushers, right? It's let's trade for Myles Garrett, which, hey, I love Myles Garrett. That's adding the best defensive player in the league to your football team. How often do you get to do that? But you have to pay for that, right? There's a premium to pay. You're paying in draft capital, and you're paying in a salary cap when it comes to an extension because you're making him the highest paid defensive player in the league, which means he's going to end up making more money than Nick Bosa. That's a lot of capital to potentially put into one player, but he is a game changer, so I get it. Then the conversation has been about Max Crosby and what would it take to get him here, and it's a little bit less draft capital to get him. It's a little bit less when it comes to salary to get him. But it's also a little less of a player than Myles Garrett. So you can see what you're going to pay out. That's what you have to figure out. What production you're going to get versus what are you going to pay out. Well, then when you start talking about a guy like Joey Bosa, who potentially could get released by the Chargers, you're not giving up anything when it comes to draft capital. You're not trading for him. He's coming willingly. You're giving in the money side of it. So if you're going to give in money to Myles Garrett, or you were going to give, to money in somebody else, like Max Crosby, well, then you give money to Nick Bosa, who could end up being cheaper. And who knows what kind of contract he'd be willing to work out, because him and his brother have a dream of playing on the same football team. Even if it was a 1-year deal, financially, right, you could probably pull it off. Now, what that contract would look like, I'm not sure. But it would be less money, of course, than the other two. It'd be less draft compensation. So the juice would be a little bit easier for the squeeze than the other two. So to me, that's why this does make a lot of sense for the 49ers. And if you wanted to argue, hey, let's not go Nick Bosa, let's go Khalil Mack, I can't argue that. I think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan proved in 2018 they really liked Khalil Mack a lot when he was with the Raiders. They actually said they were willing to pay more for him in compensation than the Chicago Bears were, but the Raiders would not deal with the 49ers, and he went to the Bears. So I think that's a real possibility, but I think there would be something interesting about Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, who are both good run stoppers, both can get after the quarterback. It would be bookend Bosa's pretty interesting. So that's one to keep an eye on. And if you tell me, hey, you want Myles Garrett because he's just a better player, I'm not going to argue with you. But, imagine getting Bosa, not losing pick 11, and then being able to add, a guy on the inside, whether it's an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, with a defensive tackle like Walter Nolan or somebody else. Maybe then you could be more aggressive because you already got your defensive end and go up and get Mason Graham. There's a lot of interesting things that come off of that, but Joey Bosa would have to be willing to play ball. But I can't say I don't like the idea. Now, the medical's going to have to check out. 49ers are going to have to feel very comfortable with Joey Bosa staying on the field. And maybe they could. A bigger rotation, if you're still able to keep Leonard Floyd, if you're still able to keep Yetur Gross-Matos, you talk about a 4-man rotation of the Bosas with Floyd and Gross-Matos, you could keep everyone pretty healthy. Keep Joey Bosa, in that 25 to 30 snap category, or even 30 to 35, and maybe he stays healthier and gets more production. So that was the one I had to talk about first because that's a big one. The number 2 one that I want to talk about is Raheem Mostert. And the reason I want to talk about Raheem Mostert is the Dolphins just moved on from him. And his agent alluded to, whoever he referred to, that Raheem Mostert was going to go ring chasing. And if he's going ring chasing, why not go back to the 49ers? Now, the question is, would the 49ers be interested in a 33-year-old running back, Raheem Mostert, who has been passed by younger guys on the depth chart now, right? Devin A-Chain, you got Wright, the young guy out of Tennessee. There's some guys that have moved up. But one thing Raheem Mostert could still do is run the outside zone, read blocks, and he's still got enough burst to be one of the most explosive backs in the league. If he's out in the open field, he's gone. He still runs hard. There's a lot of things to like about Raheem Mostert. And the reason I think it's a possibility is you've got a decision to make. And the 49ers have decided that they're going to bring back all their exclusive rights free agents. That's great. But they haven't decided about their restricted free agents yet. They've got 2 of them, Curtis Robinson, and they've got Jordan Mason. And the reason that it gets complicated when it comes to Jordan Mason is Jordan Mason can make over $5 million if you put a second-round tender. And the 49ers want to put probably a second-round tender on Jordan Mason. That way, if a team wants to come try to take him, they can be able to potentially get a second-round pick in return. Or they could just match it, depending on what the contract looks like. But, you look at what Raheem Mostert was potentially going to make in Miami, $3.3 million. So he would actually, if you got him for the same deal and you were willing to pay him $4 million, you could get $1 million savings from him and Jordan Mason. And the reason that makes a little bit of sense is there are 2 entirely different running backs. Jordan Mason is built more for the interior run game, a power style, but he's not really used when it comes to the passing game. And he's not a guy that runs the outside zone consistently and doesn't have the whole shot ability. And I love Jordan Mason, but it would give the 49ers an opportunity to potentially trade Jordan Mason and then sign Raheem Mostert for a little bit less money, defer some of that money to other years. And then you've got a 2-headed monster with Christian McCaffrey and Raheem Mostert and Isaac Guerendo right behind him. You would feel like your running back room is completely set. And I get it. A 33-year-old running back is not exactly the best thing. But Kyle loves Raheem Mostert. He feels very comfortable with him. They would trust him when it comes to pass protection. They would trust him when it comes to running the plays and making the catches out of the backfield. And if something, heaven forbid, did spark up with Christian McCaffrey again, you have a legitimate running back to step in and take over that role. And I'm not saying Jordan Mason isn't. I think Jordan Mason is one of those guys as well. I just think that there's areas of his game the 49ers don't feel comfortable with him in. One of those being catching the football consistently out of the backfield. So I think there's an element lost when McCaffrey's out that maybe you wouldn't lose with Raheem Mostert. Is he as good a receiver as Christian McCaffrey? No. But he's got a whole shot ability, that speed element, and Guerendo's got that too. And with those 3 guys, you could probably go ahead and have a little bit less reps for McCaffrey because you trust Raheem Mostert so much, and less carries for Mostert because you trust Isaac Guerendo too. But I think that 1-2 punch of Mostert and McCaffrey makes a lot of sense for the 49ers. Mostert would have to decide that he's willing to come in and be a part of that rotation, but I think Kyle and Bobby Turner could sell him on that. Hey, let's go with a 2-man rotation. We'll make sure you get your carries, but we have some explosive abilities for you inside the scheme. You were best when you played for the 49ers, and we're going to have a really good shot if we can get you 2 together to run this running game. So, interesting proposition for the 49ers with Raheem Mostert. Could actually save a little bit of money, all the while making a decision off Jordan Mason. And we'll see. Maybe they just decide to keep Jordan Mason. I wouldn't hate that either. I just think it's very interesting for Mostert. I know a lot of people are saying no. They start worrying about the age. They start worrying about the money. But financially, I don't think it's that big of a difference between the 2 guys. And you're going to have to make a decision on Jordan Mason anyways. He's either gone this year or he's gone next year. The decision just has to come because somebody's going to end up paying him money. So let's talk about another guy that has been released, and that is Taysom Hill. And so Taysom Hill was released by the New Orleans Saints. And I think first thought is obviously he's going to end up in Denver, with his former coach there. Like, it just makes too much sense for him to roll in there. But the 49ers might be able to pitch something to Taysom Hill that maybe they don't have in Denver. I don't know if they can win a Super Bowl already. Sean Payton has definitely turned it around there, and he definitely needs somebody to play that joker position that Taysom Hill played. But the 49ers are also looking for weapons, and Kyle Shanahan loves versatility. Taysom Hill last year played tight end. He was the leading rusher at the tight end position because they list him as tight end, but he plays all over the place. And we know Kyle loves weapons and versatility. But also, he did a really good job run blocking last year with a 74 grade. So potentially, you add him to the tight end room. You'd still need to add another tight end. But you could upgrade the position, and Taysom Hill's ability to run wildcat, his ability to score in the red zone and make plays, whether he's catching the ball, using his legs, that versatility could help the 49ers in the red zone tremendously. So he's a Swiss Army knife that you could potentially grab, and who knows, maybe you could sell him on the fact that he would fit really nice within the 49ers offense. So that's an interesting one. I don't know what the money's going to look like for him. He got a crazy contract with the New Orleans Saints that they're trying to get out from under. That Saints team is just really in the red right now. It's a bad situation for them. They had to move on from Taysom Hill. But that's a little bit interesting. I think it's probably the most likely that he ends up with Sean Payton with the Denver Broncos. But I think the 49ers will have interest because of the versatility he has. And, anytime that you can change your red zone offense and do a lot more things with that, that would be great. He would also be really good about quarterback sneaks. If you need somebody to do that, you don't want Brock to run the risk, even though Brock does a good job at it. But just having weapons and having weapons at the tight end position, Kyle's never been afraid to take a chance. So he is getting older, 34 years old. He's definitely towards the end of his career, but he can still be productive. He had 6 touchdowns last year for the New Orleans Saints. It could be interesting, and I would be interested to see how much the 49ers look at a potential player to add that has that much versatility. I mean, Taysom Hill, would be pretty interesting. And like I said, I still put the betting favorite on Denver, but who knows, right? I'm sure Andy Reid will be interested in him too with Kansas City. And so that's something that we could eventually see as well. Now, real quick, I want to talk to you about Underdog Fantasy. If you want to play Underdog Fantasy, you need to sign up and use the promo code Niners. If you do that, you click the link in the description, you go download the app, and use the promo code Niners, you can get up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. And right now, they've got so many cool stuff going on with college basketball, NBA, and with NHL. Go check it out. Play Underdog Fantasies, higher lower game. A lot of fun. I enjoy it. So remember to use the promo code Niners and play Underdog Fantasy. But let's get back to our list because I think there's some big names still available. And with the potential of Deebo Samuel moving on, you have to look at a couple of names that are probably going to get moved. And right now, there's no definite decision on some of these wide receivers. So right now, we don't know if they're going to be available, but it's pretty much been implied that these guys are going to be available. And I think the first guy on the list has to be Davante Adams. Davante Adams is set to make over $36 million. Aaron Rodgers was told he's not going to be with the Jets next year. And Davante Adams is not going to want to be in New York without Aaron Rodgers. So the likelihood of him being released, I think, increased tenfold with that decision to move on from Aaron Rodgers. And I think he will be released. And when that happens, he has expressed that he has interest in coming back to the West Coast. So coming back to the West Coast means Chargers, right? Rams and 49ers. And I think that all three teams are going to be interested in Davante Adams. And the question will be, what kind of contract can you come up with that pays a guy that, once again, is playing at a little bit older rate because he is older, but can still produce? And I say he can still produce because when you look at his numbers over the last several years, he's basically had a 1,000-yard season every single season since 2018. And I say almost because in 2019, he came up 3 yards short of having that. In fact, 2 times in his career, he came up 3 yards short of having 1,000, which is crazy. But if you just listen to what he's done since 2020, 1,374, Then in 2021, 1553, 2022, 1516, 2023, 1144. And those are still with the Raiders. Last year with two teams, including the Jets and the Raiders, he had 1,063 yards. And the 11 games he played with the Jets, he had 850 yards, including 7 touchdowns for Davante Adams. So this is a guy that definitely needs the ball a lot. He's been targeted a lot. Last year, he had 85 catches. That's something that he does. The reason that Davante Adams, to me, makes sense for the 49ers in a couple of capacities, and then there's a couple he doesn't, is I think, number one, this is where he's from. He played in the Bay Area, grew up in the Bay Area, so it makes a lot of sense for Davante Adams. Number two is he showed willingness to want to come back to the West Coast. Number three, the 49ers have a really good chance of potentially going a long ways, and I think he's still chasing a Super Bowl. I think when you look at the Chargers, yeah, they're really good. They got a good quarterback, but I think Davante Adams has been in that division. He knows what it's like to try to get over the hump of beating the Kansas City Chiefs. It's not easy. He might not like that. So it might come down to a couple of places. The Rams are potentially cutting Cooper Kupp. I know they're trying to trade him, but he could be a cap casualty. And so you wonder what kind of what ability they have financially to be able to sign Davante Adams. So I think that's a little bit interesting as well. But I think the 49ers might have a need. If you're moving on from Debo and Ayuk's not going to be ready till, now people are saying November, Thanksgiving. If that's the case, you need somebody to carry you along the way and help you win a lot of football games before Brandon Ayuk even comes back. And I know Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall are going to make an impact, but you're going to need somebody else to make a further impact. And I don't think you can count on a rookie guy. So Davante Adams would make sense there. I think the reason he wouldn't is if he commands too much money. You can't exactly sell the farm for Davante Adams. But I think if you could find a mutually beneficial agreement, maybe you could defer some of that money over void years, sign him to a 2-year deal, but stretch it out for 3 or 4 years. Potentially, you could stretch that money to be able to make it make sense for the 49ers. So Davante Adams, potential on the list for the San Francisco 49ers. And it's not just, Davante Adams when it comes to wide receivers, but how about guys like Cooper Kupp that I just brought up? I think if the Rams do move on from Cooper Kupp, I think he could be an interesting target for the 49ers. He would fit really nice in the 49ers scheme. You could put him right into Debo's role. And no, he doesn't play Debo's style role. What I'm saying is play that position, play the Z, be able to play the slot when you go to your 3 wide receiver sets. There would be a lot of ability there. He could play the F role. There's a lot of cool things that you could do with Cooper Kupp, but he knows how to run this offensive scheme. He's one of the best route runners in the league. He gets in and out of breaks. He's got the ability to get yards after the catch. He's got sticky hands to make catches. It's a really good target to put with Brock Purdy. So in that case, it makes sense. Now, the question will be, in this type of thing, Juwan Jennings will be playing X, and then you'll probably get Cooper Kupp, like I said, playing the F and the Z. You'll play the F in their base sets, and then their Z when they go to the 3 receiver sets, and then Pearsall will play the other. So it would be interesting getting a guy like that. I don't know what financially he would want, but Cooper Kupp might feel the sting of having to get moved on from. He wanted to be with the Rams. What's another way to stick it to the Rams? Potentially going to their arch nemesis and playing for Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. He would know that Kyle knows how to get him the football, and he would have respect, potentially for the 49ers organization, the way that they go about things. So he'll play for Brock Purdy as well. And then I want to mention this one real quick. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but Adam Thielen could potentially ask for a release when it comes to Carolina Panthers, as he might seek to go after a Super Bowl trophy. And, last year he was brought up when it came to the trade market. They did not trade him away, but he was real big down the stretch. And he made a lot of really good plays for that football team. And I was very impressed with what he looked like last year. So he's somebody that I think the 49ers could potentially, look to Adam Thielen if he gets moved on from. But I think he would have to push it a little bit for that to happen. But he's a guy that still played pretty good last year. He had 615 yards and 5 touchdowns for the Carolina Panthers. The guy, coming up on 35 years old. So this would be a situation where you get a guy that is ring chasing. Now, I want to flip it over to the defensive side of the ball because there's a player that I really like that I saw could get moved on from, and it's from the Denver Broncos. And it really shocked me to see that Damari Mathis could be a cap casualty. So Damari Mathis is only 25 years old. He was drafted out of Pitt, and this was one of the guys that I loved for the 49ers to potentially step right in and fit their system. Now, with the new regime, he found himself falling out of favor with the new coaching staff, and so he didn't get a lot of playing time, and he didn't get to produce on the field. But it was just a couple of years ago that he was an outside corner for the Denver Broncos and playing pretty tough, including playing well against the 49ers. So I think Damari Mathis would be an under-the-radar potential target for the 49ers that has the ability to play boundary corner but also play nickel, which I love him at the most. So we did hear the 49ers last year made an effort to get Amick Robertson. That came from Amick Robertson himself when they were going to play last year in the regular season. So that's the kind of player that Damari Mathis is. Tremendous instincts, 5'11", over 200 pounds, but packs a punch, has good instincts, good in coverage, good vision. I think that he would make a lot of sense for the 49ers as somebody that would fly under the radar, but could be a sneaky good signing as the 49ers look for their third corner to be able to help Bernardo Green and Yammer Lador. And if you get Mathis and you like him playing on the inside, you may be able to leave Deommodore Lenoir on the outside. That might actually help your team a lot more. So to me, he's somebody that's very interesting when it comes to the secondary. And I found another secondary player that everything, pretty much says that he's going to be moved on from, and that is Jair Alexander, the corner out of Green Bay. Just injured too much, and financially they don't want to pay him what he's making. And so that's another one. We talked about Bosa with the injuries. Now we're talking about Jair Alexander. Tremendous upside still. I mean, this dude is one of the better players in the NFL when you're talking about guys who can cover. He had a 75.2 overall grade last year, but I mean, he did not play a lot of snaps. He only played over 360 snaps. He did have 2 interceptions, and his coverage grade was 78.3, which was 16th best in the NFL. He can still cover. The question will be, how healthy can he stay, and is he going to be physical enough around the line of scrimmage when it comes to the run game? I think those are going to be questions. But if he's going to be your third corner, or potentially you put him, you put him out on the boundary, you bring Bernardo Green in when Deommodore Lenoir goes to nickel, I think that's where it makes sense. I just don't know what he's going to ask for on the open market. And is there going to be a team that's willing to overpay for Jair Alexander because of how good of a cover guy he is? But the injuries are the biggest question mark when it comes to him. So that's the concern. Potentially, you have an injury concern there, and 49er fans do not like injury concerns. So maybe he's already written off. You just look at the upside and you're like, man, that dude could cover. If you could get a legit cover corner out there to go with Deommodore Lenoir and Bernardo Green, you're sitting pretty when it comes to your nickel sets. So Jair's one of those guys. But financially, it's going to have to make sense for the 49ers. And you have to pick, right? You can't have Bosa and Jair Alexander and you're going to have to pick who it is. Now, another under-the-radar guy, and he comes from the Denver Broncos as well. I talked about Mathis earlier, and this is going to be the last guy I talk about. Well, we talked about the tight end position, Taysom Hill. Well, you also need a guy that can block. And so if you went back and you watched my video where I'm talking about free agents there, I'm talking about guys like Mo Alley Cox. I'm talking about guys that can really get it done when it comes to blocking. Ian Thomas, it's Tommy Tremble. But there's another guy that if he gets released, the 49ers should have a lot of interest in him as a blocking tight end. And that is Adam Troutman. So Adam Troutman is a tremendous run blocker at tight end, but also a very good special teamer. So Adam Troutman was one of the better special teams guys on the Denver Broncos last year, the number 1 special teams player. He graded out to almost an 80 grade according to PFF. Very good. So this would be an upgrade when you look at the position, adding Troutman, and he would be very cheap. Definitely a guy that doesn't make a lot of plays when it comes to the passing game, he only had 188 yards last year. He had 2 touchdowns. So it wasn't the greatest. He's 28 years old, 6'5", 253. Big body. And, he does some things when it comes to special teams. So he was somebody that definitely caught my eye because I think he would be an upgrade over Eric Saubert. I think Troutman would be the guy they thought Eric Saubert was. Definitely not one of those big names like Mo Ali Cox or Tommy Tremble, but definitely could be an option for the 49ers to bring in and put into that position. So I think these are some options for the 49ers. I think the big name options are probably the most exciting. The Joey Bosa, right? The Raheem Mostert, the Taysom Hill, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp. Like those are the names that are probably the most exciting. But the sneaky ones are probably the funnest. When you look at guys like Damari Mathis and Andrew Troutman and Adam Troutman, those guys are kind of the ones that fly under the radar, but could be sneaky good signings for the 49ers. So it's interesting. Let me know. Do you want Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa to play together, or do the injuries scare you? I want to know about that. Would you bring back Raheem? Even if that meant moving on from Jordan Mason, trading him away. I think it's interesting. Or do you just want the 49ers to go draft? I've seen a lot of people that have said, hey, let's just go when they're running back in the draft. I don't even think you have to draft someone. I think you could actually wait and get someone as an undrafted free agent. That's how many really good running backs there are. So, there's that's available as well. But, I don't know how many of these guys we know that are going to run 4.3 and had 4 touchdowns in an NFC Championship game to get you over the hump into the Super Bowl for the first time in a long time. So I get it, but I know what Raheem Mostert looks like in this offense, and I don't know how many Raheem Mosterts are in the NFL draft. But I am curious. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe to the video if you haven't, or to the channel if you haven't already. Listening audio platform 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. And this episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.